Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to Water Tanks, and the day has finally come where I get to answer one of my most frequently asked questions over the last few months, and that is the TS-60 worth saving your Battle Pass tokens for? Now, before this video begins, let me clarify that with the Battle Pass, your tokens roll over to the next season, so you do not have to spend the tokens that you get from the Battle Pass before June the 5th. They will roll over to the next season and then to the season after that, so you can save them up to be able to afford to get the TS-60, which will cost 28 tokens. However, let me clarify, your points will disappear. And on my press accounts you can't see, but the points that you get after you've completed the Battle Pass that you can spend in the store, you must spend those points as they will disappear before the server resets on June the 4th for NA and June the 5th for EU. So, with that PSA, now I'm going to let you know whether I think that the TS-60 is worth those 28 Battle Pass points and whether it's been worth waiting for. As the only way you're going to get your hands on this is if you save up enough Battle Pass points from playing pretty much 2 entire chapters, or 2 seasons I should say, free to play, or alternatively 1 and a bit where you're also buying the premium pass to be able to get those extra tokens. So right off the bat, just what is a TS-60? Well, this vehicle is a semi-turreted American heavily armored tank destroyer with a wild rate of fire. This vehicle is quite similar to the Conway, so today I'm going to be comparing it to its Tier 9 British turreted brother. So right off the bat, we see both of these vehicles have 120mm caliber guns, with the TS-60 having a slight advantage with regards to shell velocity and the amount of ammunition it can carry, which is a really annoying feature of the Conway, but it sacrifices a tiny bit of pen, but more importantly, a good amount of rate of fire. This thing's reload is nearly a second longer than the Conway if you're using the 120mm caliber gun. Also annoyingly, this vehicle doesn't get good HE rounds like the Conway does with its 120mm of pen, and the heat rounds on this tank, well, in some ways they're better because they're heat, so they'll do well against very thinly armored surfaces that you can't quite overmatch with the 120mm caliber gun, but can pen with heat as it goes up to 85 degrees angled armor. But whether you'd want to have 320 heat compared to having 326 APCR, that remember is going to go through spaced armor, it's going to go through walls, for example, and then have 2 degrees of normalization advantage over the heat, unless you're engaging at long range, where the penetration drop-off will probably make the heat the better round, then it's kind of swings and roundabouts about which vehicle has the better ammunition loadout. But I'd say all in all, the ammunition has to go to the Conway with the HE gun there. So how about the gun handling on the TS-60? Well, it's a mixed bag, really. Look at this. Great aim time, 1.7 seconds. Better gun handling than the Conway has with its 120mm caliber gun, but look at the accuracy disparity. To say that the TS-60 is a close quarters combat tank is an understatement. To add to this, it has 7 degrees of gun depression compared to 10 degrees of gun depression, and it doesn't have a fully traversable turret like the Conway has, with the turret turning about the same as the T-28 prototype if any of you have played those, but it can actually go all the way to the left and all the way to the right behind the tank. Now that is a big advantage if you're wanting to run away from people but shoot them still, whereas vehicles where you can only turn 45 degrees to the left and the right, well, there's no way really to overturn a little bit to get a shot and then to keep bombing it away from your opponents. So it's a fairly flexible turret, but when you do see these on the battlefield, and you will do inevitably, track them, get to their side, and feast, 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 feast. But be careful, because the vehicle does actually have a very well-angled hull, which I'll go into in more depth. So it's very hard to actually lock this thing's tracks down and also damage it at the same time. So now let's look at the mobility of the TS-60. 35 forwards, bad compared to the Conway's 40, and 12 backwards, that's bad compared to the Conway's 15. Power to weight ratio is worse than the Conway, and this thing has some really stinky ground resistances. Let me tell you, this thing feels very sluggish on soft with 2.9 terrain resistance. That means that you must have off-road driving on this vehicle as a priority, otherwise you're just not really going to get around. Look at the traverse speed disparity, 26 on hard, 10 on soft. This thing really does feel like it's a fish out of water within that regard. And look at how the speed drops by half as soon as you get on soft terrain. It's absolutely horrendous when it's on those sandy, deserty maps. So how about the armor on the TS-60? Because so far you might be thinking, well, the Conway just looks like it's flat out better. Oh, well, look at this thing's armor. 120 at the front, 80 on the side, 300 on the turret front, and 80 on the side. That means that when you're getting shot by very substantial rounds, like the 258mm of pen that the TS-60 has, the whole of this thing's upper plate is great. It's like 265mm of armor when it's not using its gun depression, and when it is, well, it's going to auto-ricochet all AP rounds, and good luck having enough heat pen to go through 500mm of armor. This thing is a beast in a hold down position. The turret is not bad as well. It can survive equal tiered, kind of like regular rounds, and it's only really tier 10 tank destroyers that are going to be able to go through the front of the turret with regular rounds. Gold rounds, however, from equal tier tanks, yeah, they're going to be able to get through quite a lot of the time, and the vehicle does have a really large and annoying weak point on top. Now let's talk about the side armor on this tank, because it is a rear mounted turret, so that gives it very good side scraping potential. In fact, if you do it perfectly, and then you were going around a corner like this with my trusty calculator, look at this, good bloomin' luck being able to deal with the T-60 in that scenario, then you're going to ricochet off its well angled thick side for 80, and you get to hide the whole of its lower plate. It's a monster for side scraping, and even the upper hull is very, very good. However, the eagle-eyed of you might be noticing, yeah, weak point here. But interestingly, this weak point is actually very well angled, so it will be an auto ricochet against AP and APCR unless they hit the bar here. However, if they load heat, then they're going to be able to also go through the lower part of it. As you can see here, they'll need about 200mm to go through, so heat is a definite advantage for shooting that, a lot like when you're engaging the Panzer VII. All in all, though, this thing, it's darn good. It's darn good, and until your opponents really get the rear of this vehicle, it's absolutely awesome frontal armor. It is a very heavily armored tank for something that has reasonable flexibility and also has impressive firepower. However, the real strength of this tank is the blooming hit points. Look at it. Not only does it have incredible armor frontally, but it has 1,900 hit points, which is really good for a heavy tank at tier 9, let alone a tier 9 turreted tank destroyer, with the Conway only having 1,500. This means that if you whack a durability device on this vehicle for your city maps, you're getting up until kind of like the 2,000 plus hit points mark for a tank destroyer, which is just absolutely wonderful. Add to this the fact that the camo rating on this tank, it's not bad, but it's not great. It will be enough to hide yourself at 7.7, which is roughly the same as the camo rating on the Concept 5. It trashes the Conway within this regard, and it has enough view range as well at 380, so you'll never have to use coated optics. Crew-wise on this vehicle, you'll be happy to know that it uses the same crew as a T110E4 or a T110E3. So you've got your commander with a radio operator, a gunner, a driver, and 2 loaders. So no pressure there, although as you will all have seen, it looks like Wargaming are going to be changing the crew system. But whether or not that actually happens, I'm just going to go away. I'm just going to keep going as if things how they are, and then address any changes there may be in a future video. Not specifically of this tank. You get what I mean in my future tank reviews. So for now, definitely have an experienced commander. You will need brothers in arms, repairs, concealment, recon, and situational awareness before you're even reasonably competitive on this tank. So you need a 5-skill commander on this vehicle. For your gunner, I definitely recommend brothers in arms, repairs, concealment. Snapshot, not really mandatory because this vehicle has good turret traverse dispersion when you're turning left and right, as I showed. So I'd probably focus on Deadeye instead to be able to pump up the damage, and designated target and snapshot depending on what your flavor is. Probably designated target for spotting and still catching those lights and mediums as they run away from you. On your driver, I thoroughly recommend taking off-road driving. Not first, I'd still recommend brothers, repairs, concealment. Then I'd take off-road driving, smooth ride, clutch braking, and then something like preventive maintenance, firefighting. And I don't think this is rammer, so I wouldn't take controlled impact. Loaders, there's no real pressure here. Brothers, repairs, concealment, then take safe stowage on one, adrenaline rush on the other, and take intuition so you can shell switch out on both of them, and then take firefighting as well. There's really no need to have brothers in arms for your loaders. So equipment-wise on this tank, I'm going for a good old firepower setup. I'd recommend you take gun rammer, vents, and a turbo on this tank. That's my main build. That's going to allow me to drive around at 40 kilometers an hour if you're using a Bounty turbo, 39 if you're not. It's going to allow you to go backwards quickly around a ridgeline, and that power to weight is going to help, especially when you're on a medium and soft terrain because of its poor ground resistances. My second build on this tank, I'm going to be dropping the turbo and using a durability device for when I get onto those close quarters city maps. And when you do this, as I mentioned, your hit points start to get up to an absolutely outrageous level. This is 2,070 hit points with a regular durability device. And when you also have 3,700 damage per minute with regular equipment to go with that, whoo, All right, field mods on this tank. It's really simple. Firstly, you want to take reinforced suspension. You must take this because it also improves your ground resistances. If you go the other way, you're going to be just so insanely trash. And it's almost, this field mod's a joke. It's just a formality. So just take the correct one. Next, I'm going to be improving the accuracy of this vehicle because its aim time is good, but its accuracy is not. I'm going to follow that up with a view range increase. For the final field mod, I'm going to make the reload better at the expense of the hit points and the crew protection from injuries. And it's worth mentioning that this field mod is oh so much better than the one that the Conway has, because the Conway has to sacrifice 5% accuracy to be able to get that 3% reload time, whereas as this is an assault tank destroyer akin to the Tortoise, you only have to sacrifice a little bit of hit points and some crew protection, which you can make up for by using a premium medkit to be able to gain that whopping damage per minute advantage. So that's it for the TS-60. Let's give it a trial by fire on the battlefield to see whether it's worth 28 tokens this season. All right, so firstly, we are rolling out on the good old Sand River map. Now, this map, it's a little bit tricky for a vehicle like this. And that's because while this tank is flexible with its turret, it's not exactly like a sniper, is it? You want to get close quarters combat, but you've only got 7 degrees of gun depression. I always feel most comfortable on this map when I have like 10 or 12 degrees, or at least 8 degrees of gun depression. So this tank doesn't really have incredible flexibility, but it has enough. It kind of just has to muddle its way through the situation and just try and handle it. In the games that I've played in this tank, I feel like it's actually best suited as an assault tank destroyer, but it's in this really weird state where it doesn't have the best of top speeds to be able to get into positions to sometimes be that assault tank destroyer that's flexible. Right, if you're taking a Tortoise, where do you take a Tortoise? Well, you either sit the Tortoise at the back or you go and crunch through the middle of the map. That would be the best way to play the Tortoise. This tank, it's not the same, right? It's not really a tank. You could go and sit in the center, right, and play like that Tortoisey assault role. But then why aren't you playing a Tortoise? Why are you not taking this vehicle into a position where you could be using its extra flexibility? So it's a bit of an enigma here. I think it will work for pretty much everyone's playstyles. If you're the kind of player who only wants to go and just play like full assault, go fight the heavies in a crunch position, it will work. I feel like I will use the turbo on this tank and the field mods, as I suggested, to use it as more of like a bit of a flex pick. If I'm in a really nice matchup, I'll probably go and brawl with the heavies and the tank destroyers. And if I'm not in a nice matchup, I'll try and use more of my flexibility to try and push a flank where I can fight more of the mediums on the enemy team. Because those mediums, they might not have the alpha to trade with me, or at least they won't have the DPM to fight back at me. They might not have the penetration to deal with my armor. You know, you've got more of a chance of fighting against tier 9 and tier 10 mediums than you do kind of like the tier 10 tank destroyers and the tier 10 heavies, I feel. Alright, so we've got a Buick-Skavitzer at long range. I'm loading some heat there to see if I can go after them, switching back with AP for the UDES, and I realize right now just the gun depression on this tank is not quite as good as you would expect. 7 degrees, it's not flexible at all. But at least by getting forwards there, I seem to have got the M5Y to commit. Now look at this bloom. It's not bad, is it, for a turreted tank destroyer that's not using a rotation device or not using like an aiming device right now. It's not too bad at all. It's definitely not like a medium. It's because the vehicle's quite quick, especially if you put a turbo on it. The gun definitely does bloom out, but the turret traverses you're going to notice when we're turning the gun to the left and right, it's not too bad. But oh dear, what's happened here? I lost 677 to the Buick-Skavitzer. I lost 602 to the Jagdtiger. Things aren't looking good. So where are we going to go? You know what? Just plow forwards. And that's because I think this vehicle will do very well fighting inflexible tank destroyers. I can side scrape out against the Buick-Skavitzer, and I know that I can overmatch him. He's got 20 millimeters of armor running along the flaps, and I know that if I track him a couple of times, he's got 7 degrees of gun depression too. 7 degrees of gun depression doesn't work in that position. And while the M5Y was suggesting I fall back, I think this is where a lot of people will struggle with this tank, because they'll take a few hits and then they won't realize just how powerful this tank is once it's got into the position of destiny. So we're going to finish off one tank destroyer. We're going to bounce the FV4005 off our frontal armor because we've got enough armor on the front to be able to do that. And now we're going to be clunking in 531 damage. The FV405 foolishly tries to ram us. We're going to put some more in, and within the FV4005's reload, we managed to shoot him, was that 4 times there, shutting down an entire tier 10 tank destroyer? After, yeah, we shut down an entire tier 10 tank destroyer there as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a flexible tank destroyer. It is a scary tank. When it gets going with that rate of fire and this wonderful combination of armor, I've blocked 1,900 damage this game. You can rip apart your opponents. And while we did get fortunate there that we bounced the FE405, you know what? If I lost every game of World of Tanks that I got fortunate, I'd probably lose most of them, right? There's a reason why you have armor there. It's a roll save. It keeps you in the game to keep going. And yeah, 3 kills, soon becoming 4. Oh, baby, I love it. I love it. This tank, it's just super flexible. It's unapologetic. And that is 6,000 combined, including 4 kills against higher tier tank destroyers in sub 5 minutes. Now, look, not every game is going to go like this. This was definitely like a cherry-picked game. But I think this game shows more than pretty much most of them, or any of them that I could be able to find, just all of the strengths of this tank. But also that it's not great at anything, but it's not terrible at anything. And because of that, if you're a knowledgeable player who knows how to outplay a non-turreted tank destroyer, or knows how to out-all-in something that has bad damage per minute, or outmaneuver and track a tank destroyer that doesn't have a turret, for example, how well you will do in this tank and how much of a monster it feels. And I'm not even going to show you the games today where we got to meet tier 7s and tier 8s. Maybe I will show you one, because man, does this thing feel filthy. Okay, so the first round you saw me playing more like a medium, right? I took a turbo, I got to the front. This game, you're going to see me playing like a heavy, and that's what's really cool about this vehicle, is you can play it like a little bit of everything. Salt tank, you're going to be slow for medium, but you can make 40 kilometers an hour work. However, get a durability device on this vehicle. 2,070 hit points. Let's look around to see how many hit points like the tier 9 heavies have in this game. M103, 1,950. Are there any others? There's a T-54E1 with 1,850. Bro, I'm packing more than the tier 9 heavy tanks on my team. Now, of course, it's because I'm using a durability device. But this vehicle, it can. I guess you could use a rotation device on it if you really wanted to be able to have just a little bit of extra gun handling. But for me, I'm going to go for the gun rammer. I'm going to go for the vents. I'm going to go for the durability. You could drop the vents and use a rotation device if that's what you want to focus on. But I think you'd be cutting yourself short by not going for the full DPM, and also that accuracy increase that you get from the vents on this vehicle. For me, I think it will work out. And look at this thing. This tiger mouse just doesn't think that we can have the rate of fire, and we do. The funny thing is that for every time that tank does 530 damage to us, we can pretty much shoot it 3 times. And while unfortunately the 53 TP actually managed to get a shot into us there, we're gonna show him that you don't mess with this vehicle. I'm wondering where that guy actually hit me. Looks like he overmatched the roof. And in fact, I'm actually going to pause the replay right now. I didn't look at how good the roof armor was on this tank. It's an important thing to go and take a look at. Okay, ladies and gents, I just noticed something. This thing has a roof that's only 40 millimeters thick. And so that means that if you have a 121 millimeter caliber gun, you can overmatch this with armor piercing rounds. So keep that in mind, that if you do see one of these things and it's not using its gun depression, that you will be able to catch that roof deck. So take advantage of that. If you miss the cupola, you can go for that. That's a good thing to spot. And look, I'm still learning as I'm managing to go through, which is an important thing to do, right? When you do take those shots, you figure out, you can see I had a look at it. I must have had like a moment going, I wonder how he managed to get me through there. But while he did 400 to me, I did 800 to him. And I've already had a very respectable game for a tier 9 tank destroyer, 2,400 damage. It's not incredible, but it's by no means terrible, right? And I'm looking at it again thinking like, okay. Look at it again. I'm trying to figure it out, thinking, how did he get me there? It must be the overmatch. It's something that I'm glad that I realized to myself and that I should have highlighted in the armor review. As often these tank reviews are not just about whether the tank is worth buying and how to play it, but also how to counter it. So how would I focus on countering this? Oh, there's another thing I didn't mention in the armor review. I'm sorry. I forgot in the armor review. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I didn't when I was doing the proper armor review. Just how amazing it is to be able to have this armor that angles down through here, because that means that if you over angle this tank and your opponents try and track you by shooting your tracks, it's the only way to track in World of Tanks, right? That they are not going to be able to go through with AP as well. They'll be able to go through with heat, most likely, sometimes with 200 right there. So not particularly amazing thickness behind it with only 50. But annoyingly, like if you're shooting this thing and you don't have a 150 1mm caliber gun, you're going to find it very hard to be able to track this thing unless you get it flat and catch it, because it actually rides quite high as well. It rides high on these tracks, a lot like a regular T-28. So it's definitely got those strengths there as well, as to be able to avoid getting locked down. Okay, so while we were loading in, I just clapped the 7772, who had a cheeky little peek against us. We bounced an IS-3, and what you're seeing right now is just how good this thing is for side scraping. If you get it into a position where you're only exposing your side armor, boy, you can just do some great stuff. So I had an armor-piercing round loaded there, which really wasn't what I needed against the Tiger Mouse. And I don't like that this IS-3 is just sitting there. So I'm going to teach him a little bit of HE respect, do 65 damage to him and see if I can bait him out. Load a heat round now and go right through his front, jam his turret. And this tank in this scenario is just an absolute beast. Now, of course, if the Tiger Mouse was a little bit more knowledgeable, he would be able to overmatch the top of this tank, and that's something that players will learn to do. It's one of the reasons why I'm highlighting it now, because inevitably there will be a lot of these vehicles once the new Battle Pass releases and everybody starts getting their 28 tokens. And we'll go for another heat round there through the Tiger Mouse. And honestly, once you get the field mod on this tank, it doesn't really feel that the accuracy is all that bad when you're packing a premium consumable in vents. But of course, your accuracy may vary depending on how you decide to play. So we're going to put a round through the 7772 there. The T-54E1 is committing, and I'm feeling a little bit nervous. You can see I'm looking over towards the side about whether I'm going to get shot by the Tiger Mouse. And there we go. I lost 525 damage to him. The 7772 survives a low roll, although I did high roll the previous shell. Thinking, shall I shoot him? Go for the CC67. And yeah, I overexposed the lower plate. That was a little bit awkward. I felt the peer pressure from the T-54E1 to go in, and I leave my opponents on an annoying amount of hit points, to say the least. But still, 4,600 damage and 2,500 damage blocked. This is not a glass cannon tank destroyer like the Conway, but remember, this is a heavily armored tank destroyer that also has a turret, that also has 2,800 base damage per minute, which you can increase with the field mod, increase with the gun ram, increase with the vents, increase with the premium consumable, brothers in arms, all of that kind of jazz. And that's even before next patch, when who knows how many different ways the crew will be able to improve your damage per minute. This thing is a deadly vehicle. And I want to finish this review today with showing you that if you be a little bit cheeky, I'm testing this tank out. I'm trying to min-max it right. We get ourselves into an awkward situation, but this vehicle has a variety of tools at its disposal to be able to handle the situations that it gets itself into. How about like missing the Emil? But we've got a good enough heat pen here that we should be able to club through the turret. And the Emil, it looks like they got 2 marks. They must be not the most silly of player, realizes, I can't hide here, so I'm going to have to back off. Now that's a very intelligent play by the Emil. Most Emil players would just sit there and just take it, but oh god. Oh no, it's pretty much the quintessential tier 9 super powerful tank destroyer. I'm looking to see who I can manage to get some help from, and it's the Chrysler. But we tracked him once, we shot his tracks again to damage his tracks, and I'm going to bait them into going forwards. We lose our engine again, which is unfortunate, but we shoot the tracks, and I mean, I should do like a Salubra, or whatever from Hollow Knight. What is it? Yeah, pretty much yum. Just yum. And get a Turret Noob, right? So, is this tank a tortoise? No, it's not a tortoise. It's not like god tier DPM and kind of idiot-proof armor that you don't really have to think about, where you just have to sit in front of your opponents and hope that they don't hit your weak point on top. Is this vehicle an absolute freak, a complete enigma, a very different tank to anything that we do have? Sort of as if Wargaming had taken a T-28 prototype, married it with a T-95, and they had a tier 9 offspring? Yeah, it is. This tank, I think it's really good. I really like this vehicle. It's different. It feels as if it doesn't need a nice matchup, but when a nice matchup happens, it feels really good to have that kind of variety. I think this is a fun tank destroyer. And honestly, I just wish it was premium. Because then I guess I could enjoy getting credits and getting bonds at the same time. And I think that's the only thing that's sad about these reward vehicles, is that they aren't premium. They don't make extra credits. But then again, if this thing was premium, I think we would see a lot of it inside the matchmaker. Now, how do I think it's going to perform in everyone's hands? I think a lot of players will really struggle. I think they'll struggle with making that gun work with its poor accuracy. And I don't think that they'll just trade well with it, with its relatively low alpha damage. A lot like how a lot of players play the Conway very poorly. I think some players won't know how to side scrape. I think some players will overexpose their lower plate, or they'll sit still and allow people to hit this weak point on the side. But for all of those players who do that, there are going to be other players who know this tank's strengths and use it to absolutely bully you. And I can tell you, there's precious little you can do in a tier 8 tank against this outside of hoping that your shells go straight into the weak point on top. And that's if it's side scraping around a corner like this. Remember, if it's side scraping around the other corner, there is no weak point on top. So then you got to hope that you manage to hit this tiny bar on top of the vehicle. If you're not above it, that is, with a 121mm caliber gun. So the TS-60, is this one way better than the TT-130M or whatever that Czech tier 9 is? I think it is. I think it's different. I think it's fun. For me personally, I would far rather spend 28 tokens on this than spending 20 or 24 or whatever the TT costs. There is nothing in the game that is like this, but the TT-130 is identical pretty much to the BZ-68, the Chinese tier 9 tech tree heavy tank. And so my firm recommendation, if you're only going to get one of these two tanks, is to get the TS-60. However, remember, there are some other really amazing Battle Pass tanks that you should probably get first, like the Char Future 4 or even the Cobra. I think those two tanks will do things even more crazy than this vehicle would. But for all of you who already have those vehicles and are looking to see which one should you prioritize, I would recommend getting the TS-60. This is the best of the two new tanks with regards to how novel it is. However, results may vary as to whether it's going to be the best of the two tanks with regards to getting you wins inside World of Tanks. Because when we look at the Conway, for example, the Conway has the worst win ratio difference by far of any of the tier 9 tank destroyers. And if we order it purely by win rate, it has the second worst overall win ratio of the tier 9 tank destroyers. So considering how similar this vehicle is, even though undoubtedly I think this one is way, way better than the Conway because of the armor that it has, and let's be honest, all of the best tanks in this list are the well-armored ones on top, then while the judges are still out, or should I say the result is still out, with regards to how good this thing's armor is going to perform across the entire play base, for me personally, I think this thing slaps, and it's totally worth the 28 tokens price tag once you got all of the other incredible tanks in the Battle Pass. Oh, and a final mention that, yeah, that game on Sand River was 1,377 ace tanker. But yes, we didn't make any credits and we resupplied 2 premium consumables at 40k. But I am really looking forward to seeing what this thing will be capable of in a long-winded game that lasts longer than 5 minutes. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that's it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video and it was useful for you. If it was, give the video a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what you think about the TS-60 in the comments down below. Do you think it's a trash tank but looks like a fun trash tank? Or do you think it's a trash tank that doesn't look like it's going to be any fun? Or do you think it's going to be an OP tank? Let me know what you think. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.